Okay, so when we left off from lecture one, we are talking about what a concurring opinion is, and so I'd said that you and a bunch of friends are going to go to Norfolk to eat, and you decide that you want Italian food, that you want pizza. Well, you agree that you want pizza, but now you have to decide where you're going to go, and maybe someone decides, well, you want to go to Valentino's because you like the sauce that they use on their like in their lasagna or their spaghetti, and someone else likes the cheese that Pizza Hut uses on theirs, and someone says, well, I like Godfather's because I like the crust better, and someone says, well, I just rather go get Domino's and take it home because I like their wings. The point that I'm trying to make is you all agreed that you wanted Italian food, but you agreed for different reasons. It's no different than what a concurring opinion is. A concurring opinion is when justices agree with the majority, but they have a different reason. And so one of the justices then will state what that reason is. And then the last one is what is called a dissenting opinion. And that is when a justice or justices disagree with the majority. And so you have a decision in the Supreme Court. There's 9 justices. So maybe it's 8-1, 7-2, 6-3, 5-4, whatever the case is. If you have a case where, let's say, it's 6-3, of those 3 justices that disagreed with the 6, one of them has to write a dissenting opinion. That has no impact on the law. It's not going to change the law. It's not going to do anything with the law or anything like that. A dissenting opinion. Now what we want to do is we want to continue to look at the Supreme Court has the ultimate power of judicial review. And judicial review just allows the court to go back and look over cases. And we want to look at some important Supreme Court cases over time that have taken place. And so we're going to call these landmark court cases. And the first one we're going to take a look at dates all the way back to 1896, and this is what is called Plessy versus Ferguson. So Plessy versus Ferguson established separate but equal. What you had was you had a black man, Homer Plessy, boarded a passenger train, and he's on that car, and he's told that he has to move, and he refuses to do so. He gets arrested. So Homer Plessy and his lawyers file a lawsuit saying that you can't make people separate just because of their race. And the case went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said, yes, you can. As long as separate but equal facilities are provided, you can separate people because of race. And it stayed this way all the way until 1954 with Brown versus Board of Education, Topeka, Kansas. And Brown versus Board of Education did away with separate but equal. Basically, you had Linda Brown, a young girl, 12-year-old girl, family moved to Topeka, Kansas. She wants to attend the school that's only a few blocks away from where her parents live. Problem is, it's an all-white school. Um, Shows up to school, and the school says, "What are you doing here? You're not allowed to go to school here. There's an all-black school on the other side of town. You're going to go to school there." And her father says, goes to the school board. The school board says, "No, this is the way it's always been, and this is the way it's going to continue to be. Um, you you're going to go to school there." And Linda Brown's father said, "But she has to cross highways, and she has to go across two sets of tracks, and that school, the buildings run down." And they're like, it doesn't matter. So family filed a lawsuit, and the NAACP, really not going to go into who they are, what they do, but the NAACP had been looking to try to strike down separate but equal. And they had a number of cases, and when the Brown versus Board of Education case came up, they said, "You know what? This is the one we want. We want to use this case." And like I said, it did away with separate but equal. And then we want to go to another very important case, 1966. Miranda versus Arizona established reading of rights to those who have been arrested. Um, I'm sure you've probably all heard of the Miranda rights. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be presented to you by the courts. Ernesto Miranda was arrested for rape and kidnap, but when he was arrested, he was not told of his rights, and so he was put in cuffs. He was taken to jail, and he was kept in a room for like 6 hours, something like that. And eventually, the law enforcement, when they were continually asking him questions, and he started to answer those questions. Well, he didn't know that he had the right to remain silent. He didn't know that anything he was going to say could be used against him in a court of law, and he didn't know that he had the right to an attorney. And so when his lawyer found out about that he wasn't read his rights, he said, "Well, we're going to fight this." And Ernesto Miranda ended up getting released. And then I want to go back a couple years to Mapp versus Ohio. Mapp versus Ohio states that evidence used in court must be obtained legally. And now I'm drawing a blank. I can't remember. Dalry Mapp, that's her name. Dalry Mapp was said that law enforcement felt that she was harboring a fugitive, which means she was letting someone who was wanted by the law stay at her house. So they showed up at her place, and they asked if they could search her place, if she was letting an individual stay there. She said no. They didn't believe her. She asked for a search warrant. They didn't have one. So law enforcement left. They left an officer there at the place to make sure that this person who they thought was there wasn't. And they came back a couple hours later, and they said, "Okay, we have a search warrant." And they held up a piece of paper. They said, "You need to let us in." And she said, "Well, let me see the search warrant. Where's my copy?" And they said, no, here it is right here. You need to let us in. Well, Dollree Mapp took the piece of paper that law enforcement had and she stuffed it down her blouse thinking that they would not try to get it back. Well, she was wrong. One officer held her down, another one got the piece of paper back, and then they put her in handcuffs because they said she was obstructing justice. And they set her on the couch. So they started looking through her house, and then they found that she had some magazines and books that violated an Ohio state statute. And they said, okay, well, we're going to arrest you for violating this statute. Problem was, finding those books, that's not the reason why law enforcement was there. They were there looking for a person. And so she was found guilty. Well, her lawyer then took the case to court and said, you can't, that evidence was not obtained legally. Number one, the search warrant wasn't even a real search warrant. And number two, even if the search warrant had been real, that material that they found was not the reason for the search. So there are 4 different cases. They're landmark cases that have played a really important role in the courts throughout the United States.
Last week, Japanese scientists
Now, this can't limit the court's power. Congress does have the power to rewrite laws to make them constitutional. If for whatever reason Congress deems a law or the court deems that a law passed by Congress is unconstitutional, they can rewrite it so it is now constitutional. Also, they can amend the Constitution to include new laws. So this is part of that system of checks and balances that we have in our 3-branch system of government. Congress makes the laws. The executive branch enforces the laws. But the Supreme Court, they interpret the law. And if Congress makes a law, the Supreme Court can say, wait a minute, that law doesn't match with what the Constitution says, so it either has to be rewritten or we have to do something to make it constitutional. So again, the system of checks and balances at work. Okay, that does it for your Section 3 notes. So make sure that you have all of this written down in your notes, because you know what I said about making sure you write down what's on the notes. This is just like notes being put on the board.